Thanks, Jane. You're watching Southeast today. Our top story tonight.
Together is the latest film to be embroiled in a plagiarism drama.
This movie, Together, it's a body horror film that's coming out very soon, and it was a festival darling. All the critics loved it, and then back in May, out of nowhere, boom, copyright lawsuit.
Creators of a movie called Better Half, which came out in 2023, took aim at the team behind Together, saying the movie was a blatant rip-off.
They had actually offered the role of the leads in their film to specifically Dave Franco and Alison Brie.
The creators of Together have pushed back. They say their work is not remotely similar.
The literal same Spice Girls song is played during a scene in which the same thing is allegedly happening.
And reference a work by ancient Greek philosopher Plato called The Symposium.
Their lawyers have gone quite hard in response. They've said that the people behind Better Half are, quote, drumming up 15 minutes of fame for a failed project.
Now, today's newest news yesterday, the writer Michael Shanks made a statement and said that this script is incredibly dear to him and specific to his life. It has DNA of his relationship with his father who passed and with his partner and, codependency and all those things like that. And that he's shocked and appalled that someone would accuse them of this, and basically just comes out and says that he stands by it and the years it took to make it real.
Say in literature, if you plagiarise somebody else's writing, the words are on the page. It's quite clear that you've lifted them from somebody else's work. With film, there is the debate over, can two people have the same idea at the same time?
I love you. I love you too.
So Together, starring Alison Brie and Dave Franco, who are a in-real-life couple, is a film directed and written by Michael Shanks. And in the run-up to this film being released, it has endured a lot of controversy surrounding its topic and its theme, allegedly being plagiarized from another film that was pitched to the couple by a director called Patrick Henry Phelan. This film came out in 2023, but was only released to festivals. As I understand it, there isn't really a public release for this film that we are able to watch. However, both Phelan's film and Shanks' film both centre on the idea of a couple who are slowly merging into one person. As Phelan alleges, he says that Brie and Franco didn't want to come on board because they wanted their own writer to write the film and they wanted to be producers on the film. So according to him, they rejected the film and instead went on to partner with Neon and Michael Shanks on this version of the film. Now, in the lawsuit, the films are referred to as being virtually identical and apparently have very similar themes and references, including Plato's Symposium. There is an explicit reference to a Spice Girls song, allegedly the same Spice Girls song, and even some of the promotional images are allegedly taken from Better Half's own promotional images. So according to Phelan and the evidence his team and him have provided in the lawsuit, these films are identical. They are the same film, and they merely just change the genre. Together is a body horror film. Better Half is a comedy. So there is little that we are really able to do and to glean from by just reading the lawsuit and watching Together. All we have is allegations on the part of Phelan and his team, and all we have is the Together film. We don't have the Better Half film because it currently doesn't have a distributor. So we can't judge Together on this story and say, well, clearly Phelan is telling the truth and Brie and Franco and Shanks are lying. That's not something that we are capable of doing in this video, and no one on YouTube or anywhere else should be doing so unless they have already seen Better Half at a festival. So it's important for me to bring this up because so much of this film's media run has been dominated by this lawsuit, but there is little else we can do other than to be aware of the existence of that lawsuit and that this film hasn't been able to put a media run together based on the merits of its own film as a result of this lawsuit. With that being said, I have found myself to be thoroughly disappointed by this film on its own merits. To start with, I thought that the concept of this film was an incredibly unique one and poignant one. The idea of this couple struggling with codependency, I thought was a very unique idea, and I was very intrigued to see how the body horror genre was utilized in this film in order to provide social commentary on this theme. This felt like possibly this year's The Substance, not necessarily to that level, but in terms of this is the body horror genre film for this year, and we have something to say about this topic that we believe is important. Unfortunately, in my opinion, the writing and the acting thoroughly let down the premise of this film. I found a lot of the writing to be quite lackluster and quite cliched. There are a fair few moments where I think that the writing actually comes across as more of a early 90s or 2000s horror film with its cliche dialogue that we've all seen before. I think something's happening to
us.
Literally, who could that be? What we're watching here? This is a film from Neon. This is a film that is highly touted and is, expected to be one of the best and has a big marketing budget behind it. And yet, I'm watching a film that has dialogue on par with Madeline Klein's I Know What You Did last summer. The writing of this film was thoroughly disappointing to me. The premise is the strongest part, and I never really feel like anything is built upon that premise. And it's a worthy premise. It's one that I think is really fun and has something that could be quite poignant and quite emotional, actually, for some people who probably do struggle with codependency. But instead, what we get is a sort of bipolar film that can't decide whether it wants to be an artistic horror film or whether it just wants to be a sort of dumb slasher film that never really rises above a 7 out of 10 sort of thing. It stylistically and its director clearly wants this film to be deeper, it wants it to be art house, and yet that director, who is also the writer of the film, he's not good enough, in my opinion, to really raise this film from that 7 out of 10 to the level of other horror films that have came out this year. Weapons, Bring Her Back, Sinners, 28 years later. He's not good enough, and unfortunately, I actually was quite disappointed by both Alison, Brie and Dave Franco, who I think are both talented actors, and yet in this they come across as overly dramatic. Again, not helped by the writing. They clearly suit a film, in my opinion, that is much more about over-the-top acting and deliberately dramatic, and, it's stage acting, it's play acting, whereas Neon and these artistic horror films are much more naturalistic in nature. That's how the lighting looks, that's how the style looks of these films, and that is how the acting is meant to be. And yet, it's over the top. It's, how could this possibly be happening to? And that's really weird for one of these films, and I, again, was quite disappointed by that because I think they're both good actors, particularly Alison Brie, I think is a very good actor. And also something that I just found very strange, considering they are married in real life, is that they, as a couple, have no chemistry whatsoever. And I just found that very strange, that they are playing themselves, or a version of themselves, and yet they couldn't convince me that they knew each other from a hole in the wall. Maybe the one bright spot of the acting in this film, for acting is Damon Herriman, who played Dewey Crow on Justified, as well as a bunch of other things, but that's what I mainly know him from. He's not going to blow you away in this film, but he's at least having fun with it, you can kind of tell. And it's probably the best performance in the film, but also his character is never given a conclusion. It kind of just ends, and you just never see him past a certain point. And he's pretty pivotal in the end game of this film, so I was a bit confused as to why that is. As I said, I think the one major thing that this film has going for it is that stylistically, it still looks very sleek, very nice. It still looks like an art house horror film. It clearly understands that naturalistic lighting and close-ups on characters is that new sort of new age horror thing that a lot of these films do. And it does that very well. But it conflicts again with the acting and the writing. And unfortunately, I also have to say that I think this is very disappointing for the body horror genre. The one moment that features heavily in the trailers and the promotional material, I won't directly spoil it, but if you know that promotional material, you know what I'm talking about. That features for less than 2 seconds in this film, and it's blurry and it's cut away from very quickly. And this film should not be marketing itself as a body horror genre film. Ironically, a film about codependency is stuck in this tug of war between two genres, and it just sort of sits in the middle, just, not really shifting either way. Am I a comedy? Am I horror? It doesn't know. I'm just going to stay here. And that's very disappointing as someone who loves body horror. I was prepared to actually be pretty fucked up going in at this film because I thought that the idea of merging two people together, surely that has something that will be pretty fucked up. And instead, it's just not. I overall found this film to be pretty disappointing, actually. I was quite excited for this film. I thought it had two very seasoned, very good actors, and it had the studio backing of a team that I respect. Unfortunately, across the board, this is the most disappointing horror film of the year. I'm just thoroughly upset by the output of this film, and I'm kind of confused to the very positive response that this film has got, because overall, I just don't really think that there's actually much here, and I don't really think that the film has very much to say about codependency anyways, considering the film kind of just ends, and I'm not really sure if I'm meant to, accept what happens in the ending as the good ending, or is that the bad ending, or are we just meant to be neutral on it, which, if we're meant to be neutral, that's not a very satisfying ending to a film, and any screenwriter would tell you that. That seems a basic 101, that you should not just be neutral by the end of a film. So overall, pretty disappointed. Stylistically, looks very cool, but most art house horror films are going to look quite cool. And overall, there's just a lot better horror films out there right now, and unfortunately for this film, the horror genre right now is very dense with quality, and this film rises to the top because of who is marketing the film rather than the actual merits of it, and I expect to forget this film quite quickly in comparison to the other ones that I've already covered.